Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a very interesting show for you today. Yeah, we're going to get all into this Michigan saga. And is Urban Meyer's coming to the rescue of Jim Harbaugh? A little bit anyway.
Oh, I didn't know you wanted to get involved with the discussion, Mr. Helfer.
Also, leaks. Were they tied to Ryan Day's family? We're going to talk all about that because there's a big report going on along those lines. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about South Carolina and the link to Tennessee. We talked about that with the college football playoff last year and the fact that Michigan might have helped out an opponent of Tennessee and Clemson. We're going to discuss that a little bit. And y'all given me a ton of comments about Hendon Hooker and how that may have affected him. We're going to talk about that. Y'all have commented so many times that I'm going to discuss that a little bit. But anyway, first thing we're going to get into is this whole Michigan thing, and we're going to talk about Urban Meyer. And this is on Bleacher Report by Zach Bachar. It says, Urban Meyer comments on Michigan scandal. He said, it's hard for me to believe that it's true. And most of you know that Urban Meyer, of course, was the coach at Ohio State for, I believe, 7 years. But he's not necessarily buying it. He said, first of all, I'm very skeptical of reporters reporting. He said, my experience is they're wrong most of the time. And he said, and that's not a shot at the media, that's reality.
Sure, Jan.
Now, I don't know how that could not be a shot at the media, but anyway. Talks about how tickets were purchased in Stallion's name for, so many games. Specifically talking about Ohio State and Penn State. Says Meyer condemned any sign stealing despite his skepticism regarding the validity of the allegations. He said, if they know your signals, it is that important, he said. You're changing the game. That's very egregious if that's what happened. I'm not saying it did because I'm still very skeptical that it did. Now, look, Urban's probably not spent a whole lot of time on this. And, I don't think there's much doubt in my mind based on everything that I've seen, the evidence. You've seen Connor Stalions standing right beside the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator right in their ear. You see when there's a pass play, himself and other players are raising their hand up and all the different things that you can do. They've even had mouth readers look at it. And then we have a picture of him at Central Michigan where he's wearing sunglasses at night with a blue light on the edge of it. And look, if there was a Central Michigan person that was there in that picture, they would have come out by now. Okay, there's no way. 3 days, 4 days this has been, and they can't figure out who that is other than possibly Connor Stalions. It looks exactly like him to me. So Urban's coming in there and trying to carry some water for one Jim Harbaugh, which is actually kind of surprising given the fact that he was the head coach at Ohio State. But I think this may have something to do with the fact that he feels like he got kind of shafted by the media when he was at Ohio State for all the problems that he had with firing an assistant coach or not firing him. So I think he's got some ill feelings towards the media, to say the least. So he doesn't want to believe anything they say. Now, we also have a report that is stating that Ryan Day's family has been involved with the leaks about Michigan's sign stealing program to the NCAA. We're going to take a look at that report. And this story is on Clutch Points by Andrew Myers. And it says, Michigan football has proof Ohio State's head coach Ryan Day's family leaked sign stealing scandal. He said this could be only the beginning of another Pandora's box set to open on this Michigan football scandal that has swept college football. The latest bombshell may have just dropped. Reports surfaced Friday claiming that Michigan, along with the media, is looking into who the whistleblowers are that are leaking information about the situation to media outlets, according to Chris Bayless. There are believed to be 2 private investigators tied into the matter, and Michigan has evidence that could link one of them to Timothy Day, who is the younger brother of Ohio State football head coach Ryan Day. The other is supposedly linked to Day's other brother, Christopher. One reportedly runs a private investigation firm in Day's hometown. There are believed to be 2 private investigators tied into the matter, and Michigan has evidence that could link one of them to Timothy Day. As Michigan continues to look into this, some sources at the university allege that evidence pertaining to the investigation was illegally obtained by gaining access through a computer, specifically a spreadsheet showing the travel plans and expenses for Connor Stalions, the staffer who is at the heart of the sign stealing investigation. It says if the sources are correct and the private investigators are linked to the Day family, it will not be a good look for Ohio State, even if Ryan Day had no knowledge of the people involved or if he knew about his brother's involvement, which would be pretty coincidental given the circumstances. It would still reflect poorly on him and the program. So this is pretty interesting and getting kind of intense. You could almost kind of see something like that because Ohio State had to be looking at the last 2 years' games and going, how in the world did this team suddenly just start whooping on us when we've been beating them for 8 straight years by multiple touchdowns? And suddenly they come up to Columbus and beat us by 3 touchdowns?
That doesn't make sense.
That's a crazy turnaround. That's a 40-point turnaround. So it makes you think, were they looking at the film, watching the coaches? Were they raising their hand every time there was a pass? How could they possibly know what our pass plays are? Maybe they got wind that there's sign stealing going on. Somebody at Ohio State, obviously maybe his brother, decided to investigate and maybe found out about this. Now, granted, this is all speculation at this point. It may be something completely different. But that is a report that's out there, and it's floating through the internet big time. So this thing's getting crazier and crazier. And honestly, if I was the head coach of Ohio State and I believed that Michigan was stealing my signs, I'd want to know. I'd want to know big time. And I could almost understand hiring a private investigating firm to look into it. Now, the Michigan people are going to give me a bunch of grief over that. And look, I understand. Look, this is a very tough time for Michigan faithful. It really is. We went through this 3 years ago with Jeremy Pruitt and our whole fiasco. Now, granted, it was easier for us because we were coming off 3-7 and we were sick and tired of Jeremy Pruitt. Whereas you guys are 8-0. You've won 22 out of 23 games ever since Connor Stallions showed up. You've gone from 69% winning percentage to 91% since Connor Stallions started hanging out on the sidelines for you. So I can understand you wanting to keep Jim Harbaugh. He's been a successful coach everywhere he's been. But this is tough, and it's not like y'all asked for it. I mean, crap. Y'all are just fans like the rest of us. You're watching your team. You've had 2 great years. You're thinking everything's wonderful. And now here comes the sign stealing allegation, and the evidence is mounting like crazy. The media is attacking your team. The Big Ten, all the coaches are furious. They want punishment now. And they had a meeting yesterday, a Zoom meeting, and they were yelling and screaming at the commissioner to do something about this guy. I mean, they see him as a pariah at this point. So this thing's getting ugly. And like I just said, Michigan fans, it's not your fault.
It's not your fault. I know. It's not your fault.
That's right. It's not. It's not. I've been through it, and you can come out on the end of it. You know, you may stick with Jim Harbaugh, and maybe this won't be a terrible situation. Maybe he can somehow hold on through this, but it's going to get rough. Probably get real rough when the NCAA finally comes out with their report, which will be months from now, and they'll drag their feet out. It took us 2 years, which is ridiculous. Now, this one should go quicker because there are so many reporters and people on this. I would think this would go a little bit quicker. There would be so many eyeballs on this. There weren't quite as many on Tennessee, although there was a bunch. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how this comes out. I don't have a whole lot of words of wisdom for the Michigan folks out there. It's just, look, there are a lot of teams that are furious, that feel very cheated. Ohio State being one of the biggest. Probably they feel the most victimized by this, although the whole Big Ten probably feels that way. Now we're going to talk about South Carolina because I wanted to put this together. I've been talking to you folks about the fact that there is circumstantial evidence that Michigan, Connor Stallions, may have reached out to an opponent of a college football playoff contender, and that may very well have been South Carolina. That's the speculation of many, and I'm going to show you the circumstantial evidence. We're also going to talk about Hendon Hooker. And I put these bullet points on a mountain, but you can't hardly see the mountain anymore. It's a mountain of circumstantial evidence. But let's go through this. And we'll start out with this one that says direct knowledge. And what that means is fairly simple. There was a report in footballscoop.com, and what they said was very clearly that there was an individual with direct knowledge that indicated that Michigan may have attempted to assist opposition of a potential college football opponent to disrupt their path to the playoff. Now, obviously, if you think about a team that could have affected college football potential opponents, it would definitely have been South Carolina, because who were they up against towards the end of the season? Tennessee, which was number 5 at the time and the number 1 offense in the country, and also Clemson, who had 1 loss, and I believe they were number 6 or number 7. So obviously, if you reached out to a team, it'd be South Carolina. That would make the most sense, and especially an SEC club. Secondly, Beamer has already been fined $25,000 in 2016 for accepting information on an opponent back when he was an assistant. So he's already been fined for something somewhat similar. And what may very well happen, I'm not saying Beamer directly got the information. If it happened, it was probably assistants or analysts that would have reached out to other analysts, and then they would have, gotten to the lower people at South Carolina and maybe said, hey, this is a way you can win this game. Thirdly, South Carolina scored 16 points total prior in 2 ball games before the Tennessee game. They played Missouri, where they scored 10 points, and then they played Florida, where they scored 6 points. So they had scored an average of 8 points per game against 2 quality, not as good as Tennessee was as far as last year, because Tennessee beat Florida and Missouri last year. But they had averaged 8 points. They come into the game against Tennessee and scored 9 straight touchdowns, which I promise you South Carolina's never, ever done. It's probably never been done against another Power 5 team, and scored 63 points. So they went from scoring 8 points to 63. And that's number 4, where they scored 9 straight touchdowns. Number 5, South Carolina beat Clemson, their second top 10 team, in a month. So they win 2 straight top 10 games after getting beat by Missouri and Florida, and suddenly they're on top of the mountain. And who are the 2 teams that were college football playoff contenders? Tennessee and Clemson. The other circumstantial evidence is South Carolina is now 2-6. Now, South Carolina has the same quarterback, Spencer Rattler, who's a good quarterback, same head coach, Shane Beamer, and a team that just took down 2 top 10 teams.
He's super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Finished out the year, everybody's thinking good about them. They're 2-6. They've beaten Furman and Mississippi State. Mississippi State's the worst team in the West, and Furman is a okay small school. And they've lost every other game. Lastly, the wristbands they used for the Tennessee game. Magically, they came up with some wristbands so they could have plays on their wrist to know what's going on. I call them, I guess you'd call it a cheat sheet. Now, it's funny. It's the only game they did that in prior, and then after that, they played us this year. They didn't have them. Now, if you just beat a team using those wristbands at home, now you're going to Neyland, one of the loudest places in the world. You wouldn't use that, even though that helps you win?
Oh, come on!
Explain that to me. How is that even credible? How is that even credible? If you know anything about athletes, they're going to do the same thing they did the year before when they won. It's crazy not to. So those are the 7 reasons. I could be wrong. This is speculation. I completely understand that. And I'm sure there's South Carolina fans out there thinking, no, that can't be. It can't be. Well, there's a lot there. There's just a lot there. Now we're going to talk about Hendon Hooker. Now, the reason I'm going to talk about this is I've had so many comments from Vols fans about this very subject, that if that happened, if they did have our signs and signals, and they knew what our plays were, which honestly would explain how they were always in the perfect play, which is how you score 9 straight touchdowns. I mean, the odds of that are just incredible.
It cannot happen, would not happen.
Let's say we went into that game favored by 21 points. Okay, we were one of the hottest teams in the country. Our offense was basically unstoppable. And in most games last year, come the fourth quarter, Hendon Hooker was done. Okay, we had Joe Milton in there who threw 10 touchdowns last year, by the way. And for a backup quarterback to throw 10 touchdowns, he's playing a lot. And there were very few games where Hendon Hooker was even in the fourth quarter. So if it is true, and understand I'm doing leaps here, I understand that completely. And a lot of the Vols fans feel this way, and they're asking this question: would Hendon Hooker have been hurt? We can never answer that question, but if it turns out that South Carolina had our signs and signals, that question, can be asked. I don't know that we'll ever have a good answer on it. It makes you sad thinking about it, honestly. That was the worst part of the game, was having Hendon go down. That was terrible. Absolutely awful. Very heartbreaking for the Vols. But anyway, so many of you have commented to me about that. I mean, it's been a lot. So I did want to discuss it. I don't know that it's very beneficial on that particular subject, but we're gonna probably find out through the NCAA. It may be months, it may be weeks, I don't know, about whether or not they had reached out to South Carolina, because these people are gonna sing. They're going to. The FBI's up there for various reasons. Some of it has to do with possibly computer hacking, but I did want to cover all those subjects today. And this is, as I said, this is an onion. It just keeps peeling back and back and back. There's a new layer every day. And I'd say it'll be like this for a long time, because it's been something to follow. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's move to continue to cover the NCAA, the sports, and all that. And of course, I'm a Vols fan, and one of the reasons why I'm covering this so heavily is that we are partially involved at this point because we don't know whether or not South Carolina received information. The speculation's there by many. And it's not just me, let me assure you. There's plenty of YouTubers and media sources out there that are saying this may very well have happened. And if you haven't subscribed, it's right here on your right. Hit this little button. It will cost you not a dime, and it helps me out. I would certainly appreciate it. And right over here's the most recent video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy based on your viewing history. And we will see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.